Hello and welcome to this Edexcel A-Level Geography essay planning. This series is really designed to help you understand the question, the mark schemes, the command words, and how best you can plan to get the best possible answers for you. This is hopefully something that you'll refer back to on a regular basis, particularly in the early stages of developing your essay planning skills. Here is a recap of all of the command words you're going to be seeing in the A-level exams. Notice that there are none of the simpler questions that you found in GCSEs, things like define, state, identify, describe, really to represent the more difficult nature of the A-level. So, looking down then we can see analyse, which is effectively very similar to an assess, but here you've got to use a number of different resources and give evidence from that to back up your answer. You have the assess question that we'll be looking at shortly. You might be asked to complete a calculation or a graph, draw or plot, which will be a similar thing. Evaluate, which is to measure the value or success of something, which again we'll look at in a minute. Then you have explain, and there are a number of different explain questions. And as you can see on the right hand side, you have 6 mark explains, you have a 6 mark explain with a resource based question, and you also have an 8 mark explain question as well. And I'll run through quickly the mark schemes for those. You also have suggest, which is effectively explain, but this will recognize the fact that you may have not studied this particular area in detail, but it is expecting you to use your knowledge and understanding and apply it to the scenario that you've been given. So if you have a look at the mark schemes for the explain, if you have a look at the 6 mark and 8 mark, you will see they are virtually identical. Now what we'd be expecting in a 6 marker, depending on the question, would be 3 simply explained ideas, sort of making points, linking them together. It could be 2 more detailed points, which are linked together and are extended, or it may just be 1 very detailed explanation using connectives such as which means that, this leads to, which creates, this causes, so, then. And so you're really developing your answer to its fullest amount. The 8 marker is very similar, but you would be expected to include sort of 4 simpler explanations, or 3 more detailed ones, or a couple of extremely detailed and well extended ones. What you need to do would really depend on the type of question and the content it's asking you to give. So understanding the question is very, very important. For the analyze, you can see here, it's very similar to the explain questions for the 8 markers, but the key is, as you can see, this is all assessment objective 1. It's kind of knowledge and understanding. This is knowledge and understanding, but also AO3, which is about using the resources to help you in your answer. We've already looked at detail at the explain answers in a lot of the end of inquiry question assessments that we do. So this series is really going to be focused on your essay planning and writing. Now, it's really important to recognise that this is a skill that you're going to need to develop. There are no shortcuts to it. It's like with anything. It needs hours of practice and dedication to become very, very good at it. You have to learn the basics first. You have to take each of the suggested steps. As you become better and better at it, then you can remove those different steps and start to do it off the top of your head. But it is important that you do take your time and you follow the stages that I'm recommending in here. You may find slightly alternative ways, which is absolutely fine, but you do want to take the step-by-step approach initially. You've got to understand the wording of the question. You've got to be able to interpret the question, because this will tell you what information you need, the command words, what to focus on, but also looking at what is the unwritten focus within the question. What other information does it want you to bring in that it's not talked about in the question? You also need to be able to understand the mark scheme and what's expected of you, and we'll cover that in more detail. But it's also important that we do initially use the notes, your textbooks, along with the specification to help you with planning your answers. Understanding is going to take a long time to develop. It's going to take repeated revision. It's going to be an ongoing process, and it's only really towards the end of the course that everything fits together and your understanding is truly at a level that it needs to be for the exam. So for the short term, I want to see that you've actually been able to understand the question, you've been able to put it in a structure, but I want you to use the information from notes and textbooks to help you. Now I'm going to give you a couple of challenges throughout these videos where I want you to pause it, to have a go at the question, and then as you play it, we'll go through it. So first of all, there are two main command words which we look at when we're looking at our essay writing for the 12 and 20 markers. So the first one is assess. So you can pause the video now and write down what do you think assess means according to the Edexcel specification. So have a go at that now. So, what does assess mean? Well, it's using evidence to determine the relative significance of something, how important it is, and give balanced consideration to all factors. Now, this is a little bit confusing. It doesn't mean talk about everything you know. It's wanting you to pick out a number of them according to the mark scheme. So for an assess question, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 different things. Then we have evaluate. So again, what do you think evaluate means? Write down your answer and pause the video now. Well, evaluate is to measure the value of something or the success of something. And what is really important that you provide a balanced and substantiated judgment and conclusion at the end of it. This is the main difference between them, and you'll see these as we go through the mark schemes. But it is important that you must have a solid, substantiated judgment at the end of these. So, if we break it down, we put it into simpler terms. For assess, it's using relevant information from the case studies to show an understanding of what the key factors are which cause something to happen. So this is often the case when you're saying, what are the effects, what caused these effects, or what caused a physical feature to happen. It also says give balanced consideration, which means explain the key factors, but also explain the factors which may reduce their impact or lead to different outcomes, or other factors which are as important. And this is where you use your counter arguments. Now, if we look at the mark scheme, then obviously we want to be aiming for the higher levels. So this would be getting sort of towards the 4 marks of it. And you can see it. It's demonstrating accurate and relevant knowledge. So this is making sure that you've picked the right information to answer the question, that you've made the relevant links between those key themes, and you have linked it to the question, that it is relevant, and that you have given evidence, whether that be case study evidence or examples. And also you are judging these factors, and you're saying how significant they are to make sure that it's well balanced. So you're talking about a range of factors in an equal amount of depth, not just focusing on one factor and then just brushing on over the others. So evaluate is really about how important certain factors are, or how successful have they been. So depending on the wording of it, sometimes it can be similar to assess in what you're asked to do. But again, this is where the skill comes in, is interpreting the question as a whole, not just as the command words. You may look at strengths and weaknesses of something, alternatives, but it's using that case study evidence or examples from resources to back up your answers. But the key part of evaluate is it must have a clear conclusion at the end. You must sum up. You must have a paragraph which says in conclusion or overall or therefore, because that is the key one, and that is where you're going to be seeing a lot of the extra marks given. And again, we can see this here, that this is very similar to, and this should read level 4, it was an error on the specification. It's very similar to the assess question, but the difference really comes in this idea to coming to a rational, substantiated conclusion, fully supported by a balanced argument. So you must make sure that your conclusion backs up what you've been saying in your question or your answer. Well, mark schemes can be very difficult to apply, particularly sort of at the start of this. So what I've done here is kind of put this into a simple format. Now you'll recognize these from when you get your essays marked. This is the kind of feedback that you'll get, and you'll get ticks in these different boxes. So you can see the different elements you'll be expected to have within your essay. So for example, the introduction, have you defined the key points? For each of the paragraphs, you need to show that the points that you've made are relevant and that you're using key geographical terminology, that your explanations are clear, relevant, and extended throughout, so they're answering the question, and that you're giving detailed and relevant evidence from resources, if they're given, relevant to the question. So the evidence that you're giving backs up your answers. You also need to have clear use of terminology and connectives which links to the question. So you've got to give judgment an important factor. A key factor in this is, this is important. These kind of things are judgments that you can make. It also needs to be a conclusion, but the level of the conclusion would depend on assess or evaluate. For assess, it needs to be very brief, just a quick overview, but for evaluate, it needs to be much more detailed. Is there a clear structure? You really need to be using clear paragraphing, and I would always suggest leaving a line between each paragraph to show that there is that structure there. And that also allows you to go back and to add extra information at the end if you need to. And of course, spelling, punctuation and grammar are always important. So what I want you to think about now then is, what are the starters and connectives you could use to show within your answer that you are doing this? Okay, so just have a quick go at that now. So you can pause the video and have a go. So if you've struggled with that, here's something that could help you out a little bit. So again, you could make a copy of this, or there is the PowerPoint that goes with this on Firefly, print that out. And just think then, okay, well, how do you show that you're making a point, that you're explicitly evaluating or assessing it? How do you show that you're giving evidence? How do you highlight to the examiner who's reading this what you're trying to do? So have a go at this one now. Well, here's some possible answers for you, and these are only sort of very brief ones, and I'm sure you can think of many more. But within your answers, you really need to be using this kind of language, because this signposts to the examiner that you are hitting these different points off the mark scheme. Okay, so these is what we'd expect to see in each paragraph. Yeah, so you'd want to see these kind of terms in each paragraph. For assess, it's probably 2 detailed paragraphs. For evaluate, you're looking at 3.